struggle. So
let's go to the more invested relating topic of saving then. Talk to us about saving for Christians.
That sounds great. So the first thing I want to start off with a biblical category when it comes to saving, and want to start with how we can think about that. When it comes to saving, I think about it from a wisdom issue. And one verse that really kind of pops into my mind from the Bible when I think about saving is the verse in Proverbs where it talks about the ant and the sluggard, and it talks about how the ant works very hard. And so a lot of the passage is centered on work ethic, because it talks later on to the sluggard, I think in verses 9 through 12, if I remember correctly. And so there's kind of an application or a pointedness towards people who are lazy or don't have a good work ethic. But specifically, it talks about the ants storing up for the winter and seeing the need, seeing that there's going to be a time where they're not going to be able to work and they're not going to be able to get those resources, and they store up for that. So when I think about saving, I think about it from a wisdom issue. Even maybe Matthew 25 is a good parable that kind of points towards the principle of saving, at least. Maybe not a command, but a principle, where Jesus talks about a manager who's going to go away for a while, and he gives talents to servants. And he talks about using those talents and benefiting them and growing them. And so even just from a money and a steward standpoint, thinking about investing as a way that we can faithfully manage resources, and also consider the fact that we're finite as human beings, and that there's probably going to come a day where we may not be able to work and bring in the same income that we used to, but we're still going to be living, and we still want to provide our family and not have to live and fall in financial hardship during those times. So
what of a Christian then that says retirement is not a Christian idea? It's an American thing. It is, by and large in the 50s, I think. Christians don't retire. How would you respond to that?
That's a great question. I was listening to a podcast on that the other day, and like you said, we are so privileged to live in a place where we have financial resources. We also have access to financial knowledge. Man, we just have so many things here in America, and the Lord has blessed us with those things so that we can manage them well. And when I think about that, I think the pushback that often comes against retirement is saying, well, the Bible, really pushes, like I said, even in Proverbs, we see this desire or this command around work ethic and the desire to work. And so I think retirement can be dangerous if it's an anti-work perspective, where the person, is very...
It's a permanent vacation.
Yeah, exactly. Permanent vacation. There's no desire to participate in mission and how they can vocationally use that to glorify the Lord, even if there's a looking down upon work. Oh, work was a pre-fall thing, or I just really don't like working for anybody. I just want to do my own thing. I think there's definitely some selfishness there. That
maybe an answer related to what do you mean by work as well? Do you mean putting in 20 or 40 hours a week, and that's your work that you have to do even when you're retired? I can imagine a Christian couple being retired, they're in their 70s or whatever. They've retired from their jobs and they've saved where they don't have to work. I can see them plugging into their church, faithfully trying to build up younger members in the church, showing hospitality, having people over regularly, being heavily involved in their community. And in that sense, those activities in other senses, it's not that their ministry work has changed, it's changed focus, and it's changed the activities some.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to view work and to think about how we can missionally use our retirement to serve the Lord and to serve the church.
Or somebody could retire and say, I'm done with America and I'm going to go be a missionary.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
Amen.
would be cool too.
Let's go. I love that.
So we've talked a little bit about saving in the investing world. So when you're talking about savings, there are a few ways you could save. You could just stockpile money in a bank. You could dig a hole and put it in the backyard. like
Matthew 25.
Or there you go, exactly. Or you could invest in the market or something like that. What would you say would be helpful for most people?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So when I think about savings, I think about it typically from two types of categories. The first type of savings is maybe an intermediate type savings where there's some expenses that you're saving up for. So maybe that's a car purchase. You say, you know what, my next car, I would really love to put a significant portion of cash down on that, either that or pay for the whole thing in cash.
Yeah.
And there are other things like having an emergency fund that I would consider maybe an intermediate type of savings. And for those, you would want to maybe think about putting those in some type of easily accessible interest earning account that's not necessarily locked away. It's very easy to access that type of money. So we're actually using a high yield savings account, Alexa and I are currently, to build, to have that higher type of interest that where the money is working for us, but at the same time it's not locked away to where if we have an expense that comes up that we don't have to take out a loan to take care of that, so that we have money that's accessible for those type of.
And the high interest savings account, is that locked away for 5 years?
No, it's not. It depends on if you're getting like a CD or something like that. Those typically will lock your money away for a certain amount of time. But high yield savings is actually just like a regular savings account, except for it just pays a higher yield than your typical savings account.
Great.
So yeah, that was one real thing that I thought was really helpful in thinking through intermediate investing for us. So, and then you mentioned retirement is the other one that I typically think of, and so it really. A common answer in the financial world in the podcast that I listen to is it depends. So it definitely depends upon your life stage and where you're at. And I definitely would love to point people who are later on in their life stage and have accumulated greater assets towards a financial advisor. Definitely want to work with somebody who has some great knowledge in that area. But for those who are maybe starting out on their retirement savings journey and just starting to learn to save for the first time, there is a lot of information to glean. But I think one easy maybe asset to where to put your money is like mutual funds or ETFs are very easy things to invest in. They give a consistent, pretty great return. You can even get something called a target date retirement savings, where essentially you put in, this is how much risk I'm comfortable with, and this is the date that I'm looking to retire. Then you set it, and you can never look at it again.
Forget it. Yeah, exactly.
And then it'll pretty much do exactly what you want it to. So
if there's one piece of advice that I wish somebody would have given me when I was 18 years old, and maybe they gave me this advice, and I didn't listen because that's the way it works sometimes, but would be to start investing early for saving. And there might be a fear of the stock market, going to crash and all that stuff. Well, you just buy a little bit every month and you forget about it. You don't look at it, no stress. And now I'm trying to teach my kids and trying to impress upon them the importance of saving midterm, like you're talking, but even investing as teenagers. That could create incredible security for you in the long run and your family. And I think I'm a big believer in investing, not gambling and like buying GameStop or whatever.
The Reddit.
But ETFs and full stock market funds, things like that, I think would be a huge help for saving.
Yeah, and just like you mentioned, one of the reasons that debt is so risky and so detrimental to people's financial perspective, financial portfolios and their status is because time is one of the greatest assets when you talk about investing for retirement. So the earlier that people get involved, the greater the growth that happens with their portfolio, with their assets. So like you said, the earlier you can start, the better, and the more helpful that will be for your portfolio. And just like giving, even if it's just a little bit, even if you can start a little bit,
the habit is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought of another kind of strategy, and what you're thinking about in saving is you're thinking ahead. You can't plan the future. You don't know what's coming. You might die tomorrow. But the way, where God has you right now, you're trying to plan for a future you don't quite know. Yet 5-10 years down the road, you might have some ideas of, like you're thinking of an auto loan. One practice I've tried to put in place, haven't been very successful, is if you don't have a car loan, you don't have a car payment, pretend like you do. Because you know you're going to need a car eventually. And so set aside $200, $250 a month, put it in this basket over here, and you're prepared for when you do need that vehicle.
Absolutely. That's another great kind of behavioral habit to start. I love that.
Tricking yourself.
That's exactly right.
Anything else on saving?
I'm not sure at this point. I think so. If anybody was looking to get maybe more of a better knowledge of the market, there's a show called the More Than Money podcast by Art Rayner.
Yeah.
He's actually an employee at Southeastern, and he has some great financial knowledge. He's kind of like the Dave Ramsey that I trust for my investing side almost. So,
Okay.
But he's a great guy. And the other thing that I would consider from savings is just like percentage. When people think about maybe some percentage or what is wise or helpful to save, we talked about anything is helpful. But if I were to advise somebody on maybe how much to save, that maybe I've heard anywhere between 15 to 25% is kind of where people would like for you to land, so that you can essentially replace the same amount of income that you have right now for your retirement years. And depending on what you want to replace, that depends on how much obviously you want to save. But I think between 15 to 20% is definitely a great place to be saving and to be consistent.
And then you had a note about an emergency fund as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier. But yeah, emergency fund is something essentially to cover any expenses that might come up, that, like, say your car breaks down and you have to get something repaired, medical expenses, anything like that. A typical good rule of thumb in the industry is that you want to save between 3 to 6 months expenses, and there's some variables that go into that.
And you just freaked everybody else out when you said 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, for sure. But you know what? It
feels so intimidating.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it does. That's a long journey. But even maybe just if you really needed to build up that emergency fund, maybe even placing a pause on savings or diverting maybe some of the funds that you would put towards retirement savings and saying, you know what, hey, so to keep us from having to maybe to take on some debt right now in this circumstance, it might be wise for us to put off some of those longer term savings for something that we know is generally going to come up. Life happens, accidents happen, things with the kids, with us, whatever else is gonna happen. So to be able to have that in an account is really helpful. But maybe a place to start even within that, because like you said, that is a scary goal, is to have something like your deductibles covered. So when you look at maybe your car insurance and your vision, dental, medical, if there's any deductibles, maybe even just taking those up, then adding those up and making that an initial goal that you could save towards, so that those things that you're going to have to pay on the front end are covered, and those are definitely foreseeable expenses for people. So
good, that's helpful.